Didn't Gabby scratch Brian's face? Isn't that what's on the police body cam footage? Doesn't that make Gabby Petito the aggressive one? Isn't that abusive? Yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. We also see in the body cam footage that Gabby Petito was crying hysterically, talking down about herself. Gabby had gotten herself into a place where she was abusive to herself and to Brian. What we need to talk about is what's called reactive abuse, because this is one of the final stages before something tragic happens in any toxic relationship. My name is Kevin, and this is The Royal We. Before we talk about reactive abuse in toxic relationships, I want to let you know that the Royal We is here to help you. Those of you who are struggling in a toxic relationship right now, I do take one-on-one appointments. Down in the description box below this video, you'll find access to my calendar where you can schedule some one-on-one time with me. Now, from the outside looking in, it is clearly evident that Gabby Petito was aggressive towards Brian. Brian had scratches on his face. Brian showed scratches on his arm. Gabby Petito told the police that she, in fact, called him names, on and on and on. And people look at that and say, look, Gabby was the aggressive one. Gabby was the abusive one. And guess what? They're not wrong. Listen, a toxic relationship is toxic because two people become abusive towards each other. These relationship dynamics are made up of instigative abuse met by reactive abuse. But make no mistake about it, abuse is abuse, whether it is instigative or reactive. And this could be the most important message that we take away from Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, is that we are responsible to recognize the signs of either form of abuse taking place in life so we can get the heck out. We have got to stop staying in toxic relationships where abuse is taking place, believing that we are not part of the problem. This is where things go upside down and get crazy. If you are in a toxic relationship trying to change it, believe me, you are part of the problem. We got to stop saying things like, I'm in it fighting because I love them. I'm in it fighting to change the relationship. I'm in it fighting trying to bring Jesus into the situation. It's nonsense. You might as well say that you would sit in a swamp with an alligator biting your ass and refuse to get out. Why? Because you're trying to bring peace into that swamp and Jesus into that swamp. Listen, at some point in time, you got to realize, I'm sitting in a swamp, I better get out. The swamp happens to be the alligator's natural habitat, by the way. So get out of there. Hose yourself off. Clean the dirt off. Put your best dress on and leave. Because you are better than that swamp. Now, here's the problem. People are going to say, Kevin, it's not that easy to leave toxic relationships. It's not easy to leave the swamp. And this is because toxic people convince others that it's normal. The swamp is normal. Listen, if you could talk to animals, if you could talk to alligators, here's what you would hear about the swamp. An alligator would say, come into the swamp. It's awesome. It's fun. This is the life. Look at me. I splash around. I roll around. I eat dirt. I can blow bubbles through my nose. It's great. And you're going to be like, ooh, yeah, this is kind of cool. All the while, it's going to bite you in the ass because it's an alligator. And the unfortunate reality is that this makes it difficult to get out of because after a period of time, you accept the fact that the swamp is what appears to be normal and you don't want to leave. And then it turns into reactive abuse. You get tired of getting bit in the ass, and so you try to fight the alligator. You try to fight the toxic person. But let me ask you this question. What's going to beat an alligator in their natural habitat in a fight? Nothing. Again, the important thing to take away is that you don't belong in the toxicity. You don't belong in the swamp. There's another analogy for this. It's don't wrestle with pigs, right? Because you're all going to get dirty, and the only ones that really like it are the pigs, okay? So let's now get into the understanding of reactive abuse and what it looks like and how we can see that Gabby Petito was in a place of reactive abuse, which is, by the way, still abusive. So we have the dynamic of instigative abuse and reactive abuse. How can we tell that Gabby Petito was in a place of reactive abuse? What are the signs and symptoms of it? So to begin with, we see that Gabby Petito was physically and verbally aggressive towards Brian. Scratched his face, scratched his arm, calling him names, hitting him in the arm, whatever the case may be. So we see the external aggression. This is called snapping back, clapping back, whatever you want to call it. It's when you've had enough of a situation, so you become abusive back. This is where Gabby was. Physically. Now, it's important to understand that at this point in time, when you are in a place where you are assaulting somebody else, even if it's in self-defense, even if it is reactive abuse, you no longer like them. Listen, you wouldn't want to hurt anybody you like or who you love. So the first thing to understand is that at this point in time, Gabby Petito, if she was hitting on Brian, she no longer liked him. It's no longer about liking the other person. And this is what we have to understand about toxic relationships. This is why you get out. Why sit and fight in a relationship with somebody you don't even like anymore? You're hitting on them because you don't like them. Okay? So we have that aspect. All right? Oftentimes what causes us to stay and clap back, slap back, hit back, whatever you want to call it, right? Do all this stuff back. It's not because we care about the person or even the relationship. It's an effort to protect the ego. This is, so really what happens in a toxic relationship is it's ego against ego. It's two people who want to get out, but want their image to remain intact. They don't want to be the bad ones. Instigative abuse, reactive abuse. Two people no longer caring about each other, just in it to see how do we get out and save our image. I'm not wrong, you are. That's what it's all about. So we see Gabby attacking Brian back. We see Gabby being abusive towards Brian. Okay, that's what it looks like. There's the external component. But there's also another component that makes us realize that it is reactive abuse on Gabby's part. And that is that Gabby was also abusive towards herself. If you notice, she was also talking down about herself. She was crying profusely about the person she became in the relationship. This is a clear indication that not only did she not like Brian anymore, but Gabby no longer liked herself. She was talking down about herself. She was abusive towards herself. This is the clear indication that you are in a phase of reactive abuse because you no longer like the people you're with or the person you're with, but you also no longer like what you've become as a result. This is how you know you have entered that phase of reactive abuse. You're doing the very things you hate. You're acting out in ways that you don't understand. This is the clear indication that you're in the swamp and you hate it. And you hate how dirty you've become in the swamp. Listen, one of my most popular videos on my YouTube channel is a magic trick I do with cups. I'll put a link right here. It explains perfectly what happens in toxic relationships as you take on their dirty water and become filled with that swamp water yourself. And you hate yourself. You don't recognize yourself anymore. Gabby didn't recognize herself. She didn't like Brian. She didn't like herself. Even Gabby's parents said, "We don't know that, Gabby. That doesn't look like her. That's out of character for her." This is what toxic relationships do. The most important takeaway from this video, okay, is that toxic relationships are in fact made up of people abusing one another. Instigative abuse, reactive abuse. It's all abuse. Nobody's right. The most important thing that we can do is take these situations, learn from it. Understand when we see the red flags of abuse taking place, before we get to the place of reactive abuse, we get out. We realize that we're in a swamp. All right? I want to be a part of your healing journey. Down below in the description box, you'll find access to my calendar where you can schedule one-on-one time with me. Telephone calls, WhatsApp, FaceTime video calls are available for you. Monday night is Royal We Live Chat, where we come together and talk as a community. Saturday morning is Royal We Fellowship, an in-depth Bible study into the understanding of this world of narcissism. And I'll be back with more videos for you right here on the Royal We.